stopped clock that's never right. Douglas Murray and the long con of foreign policy punditry. I've heard of a stopped clock being right twice a day. Then there's Douglas Murray, a stopped clock that's wrong every time it ticks. Murray's earliest available comments on foreign policy concern London's anti-war march in September 2002. If we want to state it plainly, said the 23-year-old Murray, this was a march against the Jews. Yes, apparently the mass mobilisation of British citizens, 1 million of us, trying to stop a fraudulent war based on fabricated intelligence, was anti-Semitic. A quarter century later, according to Murray, those opposing Israel's genocide in Gaza are infected with the same prejudice. In 2011, the Sunday Herald asked Murray if Britain was right to intervene in Libya. Absolutely, there's a moral and strategic imperative. He advocated for the long overdue death of Libya's leader. Go in early and go in strong, he advises. On Unheard, Murray claimed that Trump is an expert at being president because he's been president before. By that logic, if Dave Smith just reads about Ukraine for as long as Trump's first term, will Murray suddenly crown him an expert too? And speaking of expertise, political science at its best does offer theories to understand state behaviour, but let's not pretend those frameworks aren't often delivered with model-headed smugness and insularity. When Dave Smith recently debated an urban warfare specialist, he was mocked for failing to apply the proper conceptual lens to Israel's bombing of Gaza. What was that brilliant framework? He must have said the word at least a dozen times. That Dave missed? Military necessity, replied the professor, as though uttering the code word unlocked everything. Actually, this sort of academic repurposing is one magician's gambit that Murray doesn't engage, probably because he doesn't want to highlight that he did a degree in English rather than international relations. So let me ask a rhetorical question. Does an IR specialist have to be an area specialist to comment on Ukraine, etc.? Does an area specialist have to have visited the region? When Max Blumenthal from the Grey Zone went to Syria in 2019, did that make him a regional expert or just a useful idiot for the mullahs in Murray world? Gee, now let me guess. Palestinians actually have one of the highest literacy rates in the world, with plenty of PhDs, and they're often dubbed the best educated refugee population in history. Do you think a single one of them would agree with Murray? The bottom line is, what matters are the arguments that we make about war, empire, and policy. Your qualifications, if you have them, are secondary. I've got a PhD in the political economy of mass media. I'm rubbish at economics. I'm quite good at IR. All in all, so what? We're not programming the Large Hadron Collider here. We're talking about war, empire, and human lives. It's not that complicated. Murray, of course, prefers ambiguity. In recent interviews, he has taken refuge in metaphors, quicksand, the fog of war, and his overestimation of America's staying power. These sound deep, but they're just rhetorical cover for the basic failures of the policies that he championed. The truth is, even by the late 1990s, it was widely understood that even if there were any WMD remaining in Iraq, they would have degraded to the point of useless sludge. There was no viable post-invasion plan for Iraq. Ditto Libya. An American disinterest in nation building wasn't a surprise. It was official policy under George W. Bush, who explicitly campaigned against it in 2000. None of this was fog. It was willful blindness. Murray told Unheard's Freddie Sayers that no one wanted to listen to the neoconservatives after Iraq, but that's demonstrably false. The same ideologues, Richard Pearl, Bill Kristol, John Bolton, remained embedded in the foreign policy establishment. An excellent documentary series called A Very Heavy Agenda lays this out in meticulous detail, dismantling the myth that neocon influence vanished with Bush's approval ratings. Not only that, but their fingerprints were all over subsequent interventions. Robert Kagan, co-founder of the Project for a New American Century and the spiritual godfather of neoconservatism, played a key role in shaping the US response to Ukraine in 2014. His wife, Victoria Nuland, was the State Department's point person for Ukraine policy during a period when the US was openly backing regime change. NATO took down Libya's government. The CIA ran Operation Timber Sycamore to funnel arms into Syria's rebel factions. And that civil war could have been stopped in 2013 if the US had not sabotaged talks by insisting that Assad must be removed on day one of any agreement. And what do you think is happening right now in Iran? Murray also engages outright falsehoods, obscured by rhetorical flourishes. The only territory America has demanded is to bury their dead, he claims, quoting Colin Powell. Well, yeah, that territory and, of course, Diego Garcia and, Panama, Greenland, Canada, the Gulf of Mexico, 50 major bases and 700 smaller ones across the world. But other than that, yeah, sure, just cemeteries. Murray distracted from Gaza by solemnly intoning that Syria was far worse, but this flies in the face of how he calculates the relative dead in Israel. By many measures, Gaza is the most intensely bombed out polity of all time. As awful as Syria was, it hasn't been comprehensively levelled like Gaza. Murray just had 3 hours of airtime on the biggest show in the world. Exactly how much more legitimacy should we afford him before we address the actual content of his policy approaches? Murray simply did not deliver an important message. He did not take the high ground or speak to a higher truth. He suggested that there was a problem with non-experts talking on podcasts, and nor did he even know anything about the output of the two blokes that he was traducing. By any measure, Murray's was not an important message. We can all say that things would be better if discourse was better. That is mere truism. Murray's message on Rogan would be feeble if it were merely simplistic, which it was, but it was also condescending, bloodthirsty, hypocritical and wrong, just like he always has been.